Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back once again to the Weekend Wellness Workshop. I'm Dr. Dennis Courtney with you today. Alternative practitioner in the Western Pennsylvania area for over 20 years. Our topic today is a hot one, folks. You want to stay tuned to learn about a subject that you're going to be seeing an awful lot in 2016 in the news. The person we have with us today is an expert in this subject. He's a pioneer. He was there when it all started. And going to be interesting to hear his take on how things have evolved. Now, he may have started as a Iowa farm boy, but he's in the big city now, and he is in much demand. He's an osteopath by training, a pathology by specialty, and an excellent clinician and member of the integrated medical field. He dominated something called HBO, and that's not a TV station either. He dominated HBO, and that's hyperbaric oxygen, and was able to completely educate the world on it, and then moved into the stem cell arena. His name is Dr. David Steenblock. I like to call him a personal friend as well as a colleague. I thank him for coming aboard today. Let's say welcome, Dr. Steenblock, and thanks for allowing me to invade your, well, it turns out your afternoon.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being on.
David, just do me one favor. Speak a little closer into that mic, and I know you're soft-spoken, but talk like you're a little bit angry. I know you as angry David Steenblock. It'll help us out here, okay? All right. Now,
if I can turn up my volume here, too.
All right, you're good. Sounds like you're coming across loud and clear now. Now, okay. I wasn't kidding when I said that I always think of when the word stem cell comes up, there's only one name that pops into my mind, because I know you've been working in this arena from its inception, from its beginning. Now, you were there at the beginning, and you've now watched the lay of the land shift quite a bit. I want you to hearken back to those earlier days when this was not as well known, and what led you to it? Why did you jump in? I mean, and you always jump into everything up to your neck and your eyeballs, and you certainly did that here, having one of the first and only centers in the entire country, and you still run that center out in San Clemente, California. But talk to us a bit about stem cells in the early days, David.
Well, in the 90s,
a little louder, David.
Sorry, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
In the 1990s, I specialized in stroke rehabilitation using hyperbaric oxygen as one of the mainstays of the therapy. And because I was one of the first, if not the first, doctor and clinic to offer that kind of therapy for stroke patients, I had stroke patients coming from all over the world for the treatment. And I went through about 2,000 patients in 10 years with a 60-day program where the people would come and spend 2 months with me, and I would put them through daily hyperbaric oxygen and physical therapy and speech therapy, etc. And almost 95% of the patients I saw significant responses with that kind of program. And these were patients that had had their stroke anywhere from 1 to 10 years before they came to see me, and most of them had gone through all the physical therapy methods that they could, and et cetera, and they had run up against a wall. They were not getting any better. And so for me to take those people that were not getting any better, on the average about 3 years out after a stroke, and having 95% of them having significant improvements was very good. And because of that, hyperbaric oxygen has really become a mainstay of stroke rehabilitation, at least the alternative medical field.
Sure.
Now, when I had all those patients, even though I was having good results with them, some of them did not have the results that they were hoping for. And in other words, they had let's say they were in a wheelchair, and I got them up walking, but they still had to use a walker or cane or something, and they still had some weakness on an arm or leg or whatever. And they were looking for what else can be done, and they were asking me, what else can we do? We've gone through all this thing, and do you know of anything else? And at that time, stem cells were just starting to become known, and so I started looking into it and digging around on the internet and whatnot, trying to find out who was doing it. And I found that the Pasteur Institute in Paris, they were doing some stem cell work, and so I managed to get a tenuous relationship going there, and was able to get some stem cells from them in the original early days. That was around 2000, 1999, and I had good results with that, but that was very difficult to get those stem cells, and so I continue to try to find stem cells better suited for use in this country and in Mexico or wherever, and came across a source for umbilical cord stem cells, and so I was able to start using umbilical cord stem cells around 2000 for those patients that had already gone through all my therapies and with hyperbaric, etc., for their stroke, and saw that with stem cells I was able to get these people better yet. And so one of my first cases there was a fellow who'd gone through hyperbaric oxygen. He'd had a stroke, and he also had glaucoma. He had optic neuropathy from the glaucoma, and he had gone blind in one eye, and he had his stroke problems with walking and all that. So I had gotten him up so he could walk and talk and whatnot, but he was still having problems with his eyesight, and that eye had gotten worse as compared to better for a variety of reasons, one of which he'd been gone from my care for a few months, and he had done well, but his eye had continued to get worse with that glaucoma. And so he wanted to have his eyesight restored, and he was blind at the time. And I said, well, I don't know, we can try. And I searched, what I did really was I searched all over the world. I talked to a lot of researchers around the world. I went to meetings on eye care and glaucoma, etc. And it took me a few months to really go through the world as far as I could find anybody and everybody that had any knowledge of how to do this, because it was not known how to
Sure.
treat an eye at that time with stem cells. And so I had to try to find somebody who knew. And I'll tell you for a fact, none of the researchers, with all their grants and all their money, they had really little clue other than if you were a mouse or a rat, then they might, you could do this or that, but nothing for clinical use. And so but I did run into a Russian MD back in about 2001, I believe it was, and he had done stem cells in Moscow, and he and I became friends, and he helped educate me about how to do some of this work, and with his aid, I was able to go forward, and for that patient who was totally blind, black blind, he'd take a bright shining light in both eyes and he couldn't see a thing. I took him to Mexico, and we put a catheter up his femoral artery, up into his carotid artery, and we inserted some mannitol, which is a sugar that helps open up the blood-brain barrier, and we put the stem cells in then, and within about 6 weeks, he was able to read the newspaper.
No.
So he regained his eyesight.
Come on.
And he actually could see again, and he could read. He could see his food. He could eat again. And it was, to me, one of the most miraculous cases I've had, because of going from totally black blind to being able to see and read again. That was one of my first cases using, on the eye, and I had really tremendous results with it.
Let me do this, David, because I figured maybe I would end our conversation by asking you about some of your most noteworthy cases. I had no idea you had a blockbuster case to open it up with, and
sorry.
that one is going to go down the history books as the greatest opening ever done in any radio show on any medical item has ever been discussed. And I certainly, working with as many eyes as I do now, I'm going to be calling you about it. Let's maybe back up just a bit. And there you were at the beginning of this whole thing. And you're right. This stuff was happening in labs, but it wasn't happening on people. And you've always taken that challenge and that gauntlet to champion this for people to get them better. But the question has to be asked, because I'm sure it's asked of you a lot, what are stem cells and how do they work? So that guy who he was blind, now reading newspapers, how does that work? How can my listeners come to understand that? How does it work?
Well, as you mentioned, I'm an Iowa farm boy, and so I learned how to plant seeds. And seeds are really basically the plant variety of stem cells. So, to grow a crop of wheat or oats or whatever, you had to use oats or wheat or whatever, those kind of seeds. Corn, you had to put corn seeds out there. And, you would take a little tiny particle there and stick it in the ground. And after a few months, you'd have this plant of corn that'd be 15 feet high with 2 or 3 kernel, what do you call those things?
The stalks.
It's so long I've been on Iowa. The
corn stalks.
Yeah, the corn stalk is on. You have corn on a cob, and so I don't know. I guess that whole thing would be called corn on a cob or whatever. What's that called? The whole.
They're corn stalks to me, and I'm not an Iowa farm boy.
Yeah,
Shame
it's
on
like
you.
I'm losing my brain in my old age here. I think I need some stem cells. But any case, you have seeds that grow into big plants and provide a lot of food and whatnot. And the same and to have a seed grow well, you need to have good nutrition. You need to have a soil that is healthy and free of rocks and tin cans and garbage. And so sometimes, in most cases, when you're farming, you have to, first of all, you have to go out and plant. You have to plow your soil, so you have to turn your soil over. And so you take the top layer of plant material that's still there from the last crop, and you bury that, and then you rake over that soil, and you break up the clumps and all that, turn it into a finer particle, and you may actually at that point be adding some fertilizer as well. And then you go along after you've prepared the ground enough, you put your seeds in, and then hopefully there's some rain and sunshine, and the plant will grow. In the human body, you have to sometimes, not always, but in many cases where you have people that are older and have a multitude of problems, they've accumulated a bunch of problems as they've gone through life, and so they've had like silver amalgams put in their teeth, or they've eaten a lot of sushi, or they've been exposed to paints or solvents or whatever. There's a variety of toxins, and a lot of foods have toxins present, and our own body makes toxins. So these materials and infections, that's another factor. Infections, chronic infections, indolent infections of the intestinal tract or the sinus are all factors that can interfere with the growth of the seeds that we have. Now, we all have seeds. We all started with as a seed, and when our father and mother got together, they formed a seed, and that was called a zygote. And a zygote is basically a sperm and an egg put together and forming one cell, and that's called the zygote. And the zygote then divides and multiplies in the mother's womb, and from there, you can, if you want to, you can actually take the early blastomere or blastocyst and extract embryonic stem cells, which have been used and are being tried to be utilized for a variety of things. That's where all of our research dollar is going for, is this particular aspect of using embryonic stem cells for treatment. But the trouble with that is that when you put them into culture, they do multiply and grow, and you can grow them and grow them and grow them, which is great, and they're all the same. But when you try to convert them into something else, like neurological stem cell, and you use different differentiation agents, things that tweak the original stem cell and turn it into a stem cell that's going to become neurological tissue, the process of doing that is not 100% complete. and because of the nature, the physical nature of the cells, some of them stick together, and when you have a few stick together and all the rest are converted into neurological cells, you're left with some of the cells that are still embryonic stem cells, and these undifferentiated cells that have not become neurological in that soup that they're using, that material is then injected right along with the neurological cells when you treat, and those embryonic stem cells then, because they're undifferentiated, can and do become teratomas and teratocarcinomas. So the formation of the neurological tissue is good, and you may have great results, but if you wind up with having some kind of a teratoma or teratocarcinoma in your heart or some part of your body, that's not so good. Like they had one that was in the brain that a man had. So it's not a good idea.
All right, let's do this, David. We're right up at a commercial break right now, and you've just touched upon something that's really important that I want my listener to recapture. Would you allow me? We're going to take a short break. We'll come back. We got to pick up with this thing. It looks as though one of the first things our listeners need to be aware of is embryonic stem cells really are not the correct line to start with, and I'll let you explain maybe what some of the better lines are when we return. So Dr. David Steenblock is with us. As you can see, he is a pioneer. How about the guy, the first patient with the vision, folks? You ever going to forget that one? We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in a moment. More with Dr. Steenblock on our return. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back once again to the Weekend Wellness Workshop. We're here this Saturday morning talking to an expert in stem cell therapy. He was there at the beginning, folks, and as you can tell, his experience is, it's not beat by anybody as far as I'm concerned. We were talking about stem cell lines and made the point talking about embryonic stem cell lines. That if I gathered the discussion correctly, that the point you're trying to make is that embryonic stem cells are probably not the best stem cells to select if you're going to do stem cell therapy. Did I get the message right?
Yeah, they're generally not even being used that I know of because of these dangers, and yet we're spending billions of dollars trying to make those particular kinds of cells useful, but the scientists have been running into lots of problems because of this fact that you can't convert all of the cells. Let's say you have a billion cells. Out of the billion cells that are embryonic, that are all great and all that, they're wonderful, fantastic. If you even have one cell that you give to the person that turns into cancer, then you give a billion cells to a person, you got a person with cancer. So that whole thing is not until the FDA has reviewed all of that kind of research and has okayed it, I would not be using embryonic stem cells.
All right.
Now there's other kinds of stem cells, and these are more, they call them adult, but basically they're any kind of a cell that is found in either a baby or the umbilical cord or an adult child or an adult, so that an adult stem cell can be considered coming from an umbilical cord or even the placenta or the amniotic. They would all be called adult stem cells because they're not coming from the blastocyst, that very, very early stem cell source, which is in the first 3 or 4 days after conception. The scientists are able to grab that small cell mass and extract from that mass the embryonic stem cells, and those, like I said, are dangerous because they have that potential. So in general, clinically, we have to use something that doesn't have that danger, and the adult stem cells have already had some degree of what is called differentiation, or they have become somewhat specialized, and once the cell has become somewhat specialized, they lose that ability to turn into cancer. And so that these adult stem cells are in general quite safe. There's only, I think, maybe there's been one case where somebody developed cancer, and that was from a fetal. You have a little confusion here. Embryonic stem cells are from the early stage of the zygote division, and then you have the embryo itself, which is the baby in utero up until the age of 2 months. At 2 months, it's no longer called an embryo, but it becomes called a fetus. And so if you take the baby that is, say, 6 weeks old and take stem cells from that, those are still called, by many people, embryonic stem cells, even though they're not really the kind of stem cells that we've been talking about that are so dangerous. So the ones that are being sold as fetal stem cells are safer in general than the embryonic ones from the laboratory, and so those are being sold in very special places where the law looks the other way, because they're basically illegal pretty much any place in the world. So fetal stem cells, where they take aborted tissues and use those, are in general illegal all over the world. And so we don't have those here in the United States. We're not using those in the United States, and I've never used those. But we do use the umbilical cord blood, which is the material that is thrown away after a baby's born. And so the baby's born, and there's always this, the umbilical cord comes from the abdomen to the placenta. The doctor cuts that cord, and the baby now has this little stub on his belly, but the rest of it is that long white cord, and that cord has blood in it, and you can take the blood, or you can take the actual wall of that umbilical cord and use that for obtaining stem cells, because there's stem cells in the actual wall of the umbilical cord, and also in the blood, and in the placenta, and in the amnion, and in the amniotic membrane. So all of those have very powerful, good effects on helping a person heal a variety of different problems.
All right, let me ask you this, David. So if you administer stem cells, and let's say you give them intravenously, so they can land just about anywhere, and you call them, good, I have a farm boy that you are, seeds, and so wherever they may land, is it accurate to say that they have the potential to become a healthy cell of the tissue that they land in and become that kind of cell? Is that pretty much what happens?
No, not really. In general, that doesn't happen unless you do certain things. Like, for example, there's a thing called HLA typing. And so if you have cancer and you're getting chemotherapy and radiation for killing all your cancer, it will also kill all your bone marrow. And your bone marrow is where most of your stem cells are, and that's where you make red cells and white cells. And so if you kill all that, then you die because you get an infection and you can't resist the infection. So what they have to do is give you stem cells to repopulate the bone marrow that has been destroyed by your chemotherapy and radiation. So they use somebody else's bone marrow or somebody else's umbilical cord blood stem cells, and they give that to the person, and those stem cells then are able to go to the bone marrow that has been destroyed by the chemo and radiation, and they're able to repopulate the bone marrow and start to grow and make new red cells and white cells. And to do that properly, what they do is they try to match you with the person that is, or the wherever you're getting these stem cells from. So if you're getting them from another adult, then they have been typed, and their blood has been typed and crossed for what are called HLA antigens, which are human leukocyte antigens, and these antigens are what control the rejection phenomena. So if you do not have these matched and you take somebody else's bone marrow and put them into you, then you have a reaction which is called a graft versus host reaction, and you don't want that because it can make you sick and it can actually kill you. So what you want to do if you're getting a bone marrow transplant, you want to have stem cells that are matched to your body, and you do that by doing this HLA typing. Okay.
Now, those are on the autologous ones? I mean, I think you're talking bone marrow, adipose, and PRP.
Yeah, that's allogenic, and allogenic means it's from somebody else.
Somebody else.
Autologous you don't need. That's yourself. So you can, now some of the time what they do is they take a bone marrow, they take as much bone marrow as you can. Let's say that you have cancer in the lung, but you don't have any evidence of it in your bone marrow. So they might want to take your bone marrow and they process that and try to remove, if there are any cancer cells, they try to remove that. They put the bone marrow then in the freezer, then they give the chemotherapy radiation, and then they give you back the bone marrow that has been purged of the cancer cells and all that, and they hope that they've gotten it all. So that's another way of doing it. But all of these things are expensive because of the labor involved and the equipment and all that kind of thing. So in general, it's better to, we're not talking about cancer. What we're talking about now is using stem cells for treatment of a variety of different chronic diseases. And these are things like multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or arthritis, joint problems, ALS, and it goes on and on, colitis. There's a variety of different chronic asthma. There's all kinds of different diseases that people have that stem cells can be very helpful or actually curative. And yet we can't talk about it because the FDA says when I talk about stem cells as like in this case with the eye, he basically had his blindness cured. However, I can't say that because that's then making stem cells into a drug. And if I call that a drug, if I make a claim for anything, then it's a drug. And the FDA says you can't do that without going through clinical trials and spending, $500 million to prove that it's safe. And so, we have the rules in this country are very restrictive as far as me telling you that stem cells are good for treatment of arthritis or for diabetes or for anything. I can't really say, diabetes is here's out of 100 cases I've treated, I got 95% cure rate. If I said that on any particular disease, the FDA
would be right on you, wouldn't they?
They could be right here closing me down. So I can't be telling people what I do exactly because of the fact that I've got somebody watching over me. But if anybody's got any problem, they can call my office at 949-367-8870. And just to ask one of us what we have to offer, and we can talk to you about it. And I think in general, if I tell you everything that there is that we have to offer, you have to give me some kind of paper that says that you're a patient. As long as you're a patient of mine, I can tell you about anything. But as long as you're not a patient, I can't tell you as much because of the way the laws are.
All right, let's do this.
As a patient, you are under my medical license. As a non-patient, you're not. And when you're not a patient of mine, then I really have to follow what the FDA says.
Well, this sounds like some nuances there we don't even want to get into, David. Let's do this much.
I don't want to give up.
No, we don't want to get into it. Let's do this. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, as we head up to the last segment of the show, I would like you. I mean, the first case was a mind blower in terms of how effective it was, but over these many years, you have seen countless patients come to you with certain problems, and I'm very interested to find out how well you did with them. So we're going to take a short break, ladies and gentlemen. We'll come right back with Dr. Steenblock and find out about how many different issues could be addressed by potentially using stem cells. This is all theoretical, of course, because we're not allowed to make any claims. I know that, David. We'll be right back in a moment to talk about what things can go right with stem cells. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back once again to the Weekend Wellness Workshop. I'm Dr. Dennis Courtney with you today. The subject is stem cell. And with the gentleman we have today, the expert in stem cells, way back when stem cells were a word that really nobody knew about, he took the charge to help his patients and has done remarkable work, yeoman's work, over these many years, and has watched stem cells really grow to a point that, we'll probably ask him, where does he think things are going to go from here? We've been talking about selecting stem cells, administering stem cells. Dr. Steenblock, I thought it would be interesting because with your first case talking about the gentleman who couldn't see and now reads newspapers or could read them back then, who knows what he can do now? He's probably an Israeli fighter pilot. Just think about it. Neither. But I'd like to ask you to share with my listeners, over these many years, what have you seen stem cell, in what arena, what disorders, what dysfunctions have you seen stem cells do the things that stem cells can do?
Well, we need a few hours to answer that.
Take some of the most noteworthy ones.
Yeah, I think number one, I know in my book, Umbilical Cord Stem Cell Therapy, that I published in 2006, I reviewed our work with cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is a disease of children usually where the brain has been damaged because of a lack of oxygen during birth. And so they have certain characteristics, but the main characteristic of these children is that they have, in the brain, you have white matter and gray matter. Gray matter are like computer chips, and the wiring is like the white matter and the wiring. So the wiring is damaged in these kids. And it turns out that stem cells go to this wiring, this white matter, and actually tend to go to that in these children as compared to any other tissue. And so that's one of the reasons why I chose these children, because they didn't have any other medical problems, and they just had this particular white matter damage. And I knew that from animal work, the stem cells tended to go to the white matter and work on it. So I started treating children with cerebral palsy because at that time, nobody had done anything. And so I was doing really the first clinical trials at all of anybody, other than perhaps some of the Russians, but their data was not published in the United States or in English. So I didn't know about it. Anyway, the point was that we went ahead and treated children with cerebral palsy, and we've treated now I've treated thousands of children with cerebral palsy with stem cells, and we have at least an 80% success rate in terms of some degree of improvement. Not a cure, but an improvement. And if you want to, you can go to YouTube and look on a variety of different testimonials. One of my first cases was Emily, who is 17 years old and had a right arm that had been clutched to her chest for 17 years. She couldn't move her right arm. It was just spastic and stuck onto her chest. Mm-hmm. And her right leg was also spastic, and so she had to walk with this limp, and so she was just basically limping her way through life. And she came and I did a bone marrow treatment on her. I took bone marrow out of her hip and gave her back IV the bone marrow from her hip, and that was at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. By 9 o'clock the next morning, she and her mother and father were sitting in my office, and I was surprised. I walked in and I said, "What are you doing here?" I thought, "There's a problem." And I said, "In fact, is there a problem?" And they said, "Oh, no, we wanted to show you." And the mom said to him, "Emily, stand up and show Dr. Steenblock what you can do." And Emily stood up, and she was able to take that right arm that she had not been able to move off of her chest for 17 years. She was able to take it and extend it up over her head.
No.
And she said in 5 hours after the treatment, her toes on her right foot that had never, ever worked in her entire life, she was able to move them for the first time. And within the next day, that right foot had straightened out, and she was able to walk almost normally. Within a few months later, she was able to go dancing at her, I think it was a senior prom.
This is unbelievable.
Yeah. And that, her testimony is on YouTube, so you can see that I'm not making this up. And so, that we have had, maybe 5 children that were blind from birth who now can see. And that's, that to me is truly miraculous when you have a child that cannot see and now can see. And just like that older gentleman who had the stroke and had the glaucoma and all that, these are all, to me, miraculous.
Every single one of them,
results. Sure. Now, otherwise, going on to autism, you see good results. Not as good with autism as with cerebral palsy, because again, autism is a different condition, and there's a variety of different things. They have, oftentimes they have yeast infections, they got mercury problems, they got overreactive immune systems, etc. But even with all of that, stem cells oftentimes help them tremendously. Now, otherwise, as we get older, we have more, in the teenage years, I've seen more trauma, like acromioclavicular joint separations or traumatic injuries, things like that. And we can take the bone marrow and take what is called the buffy coat, which is the white blood cells from the bone marrow, and inject into these areas, and you can have tremendous healing. Like I had one case with a grade 4 acromioclavicular separation, and the guy he was like 35, and they wanted to operate on him, and he didn't want to have it operated on, and I just treated that with his bone marrow, and it was about maybe 3 to 4 weeks, and within, let's just say 4 weeks it was, and that shoulder healed up. There was no sign that he'd ever had any injury whatsoever. It was back to normal, and he went back to playing ball and whatnot. I had another 18-year-old, same kind of story. Went to play, but he was even faster in recovering. It was within a week or two he was back playing. His sports. It was a sporting injury, and he had torn up his shoulder, and away he went right back into the sport. So you see these younger people responding greatly, and so that's another fact that as you get older, your stem cells don't work as well, and you don't have as many growth factors, and that slows down your rate of healing. So you wind up having to do more. And then, like I said before, the older person has a variety of different infections or toxins that have accumulated. We have to work on all those. In addition to the stem cells to really get a good therapeutic result. But overall, multiple sclerosis, I've seen cures literally where if you call a cure, they go from a wheelchair to walking around like normal and going back to work. They may have a relapse somewhere along the line, but I haven't seen that. And so you see that. Parkinson's patients I've seen go back to dancing. They were, come in, they're shuffling and can hardly move, and within a matter of just a few weeks, they're back out dancing and carrying on like as if nothing happened. So what else?
Let me put it to you this way. It seems like I'm listening. The sky's the limit here.
Well, it's not. It's because there's a limit in terms of the dollars, because these things are not cheap. And I think that's really the biggest thing. Our costs have gone down tremendously, and I think I'm still the lowest priced in the country, if not the world. But still, even being the lowest cost still doesn't mean that it's free. And it costs me money to put it together and operate and all that kind of thing. So there are costs involved. But if you can disregard the costs, then you're getting close to the sky's almost the limit.
The sky's almost the limit.
Every day we're learning more new things and how to combine this with that and whatnot. So now we're in that process of, there's stem cells, but then for an individual case, I have to do this or that, and I recommend you do this or that before you do these stem cells, and how many and how you do it. These are all things that take time and effort to learn how to handle these different kinds of cases.
Well, I'd like to hear, in fact, if the money was no object, that literally the sky is the limit. Certainly from the things that you discussed that in your own hands and with the how effective in terms of the numbers, there aren't very many people that walk away and aren't tremendously helped, and so rapidly too.
You know what? Just before I let you go, I do want to tell you that the older person who's up there, 85 and up, they generally are getting to have all kinds of problems. And I can tell you for a fact that I have just been blown away by giving stem cells to these people. I had one who just came back here about 3 years ago. She came in and she could hardly talk. She could hardly walk. She was, really in trouble. And now I gave her stem cells then, and now she comes back just because she's now 90, and she wanted to come back and say hello and get a kind of tune-up. But in general, I could not literally believe how well she looked 3 years after I thought she was dying on me. And this is not just one case. I've seen this over and over again, that the older person, when they get these stem cells, even my mother, who was 85, had a stroke. I gave her just a small vial of stem cells because that was many years ago. And she had improvement of her stroke and her paralysis and everything, even at that age. So, the older person that's just needing a refresher and wants to keep in the game and all that, they should think hard about stem cells. I've got a whole bunch of things that we can do for that older person that needs an anti-aging program that really works. That
is a great way to bring this, sky's the limit into context and into perspective. As we have just literally a couple minutes left to go, I wondered, there you were at the dawn of this all, back there at the turn of the century, 2000, and you've watched this thing grow to such levels now where it's becoming countrywide. This is moving everywhere, David. Where do you see this thing going? Where is the sky the limit here? What's the future for stem cells in the near future as you see it?
Well, you would think that it's going to keep on getting more and more popular. It's been a lot slower in terms of that than I ever would have thought. I thought, when I started this is such a miraculous therapy that all the doctors in the country, if not the world, would jump on it because this offers so much more therapeutic results than anything that we've had. And you would think because of these tremendous results, everybody'd be on it, but that's not the case. And I think one of the big problems is that the FDA just has not figured out what to do with it all. And so now they've made fat stem cells illegal. So all those people are advertising for fat out there. And if you've been thinking about doing fat stem cells, you never know what this FDA is going to do because they may decide to go after all of the guys that are doing. That's probably a few hundred, if not 1,000 doctors around the country doing fat stem cells.
Yeah, that did put a dent in that market, and
that would really put a dent in everybody's, and that would take away the value for a lot of people. And in some ways, I kind of agree with the FDA because the fellows that are doing it really are not doctors. They're more like plastic surgeons, and they've learned how to do this very simple technique of taking the fat from your belly and throwing some collagenase in there and spinning it down in the centrifuge and whatnot. And out they come with some stem cells, and they inject it. And they charge a whole bunch of money, and they don't look into all of the factors that they should be because they're not playing doctor, or acting like a doctor, and that is evaluating the patient for what all is causing their condition and trying to use stem cells in combination with the other factors that you need to be addressing. So if you got heavy metal poisoning, you need to take out the heavy metals. So you don't want to have mercury and lead in your system if you're going to get stem cells, because then you spend $10,000 or whatever and you don't get any results and you wonder why. And the reason was because you had all these poisons in your system and they poisoned the stem cells. So,
all right, so look,
these doctors that are doing it are in general not evaluating that kind of thing.
We are coming right up to this gong. Look, I'm going to abruptly have to say thank you so much, Dr. David Block.
Let's give him my website. It's StemCellMD.
StemCellMD?
StemCellMD.org.
All right.
STEM cell CELLMD.org.
Okay, let's say we're going to bring you back, David, and then sometime in the near future. Thanks very much for all that you taught us today. Pittsburgh, I hope you enjoyed that. We'll see you now. So long. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Weekend Wellness Workshop. I'm Dr. Dennis Courtney with you today on this Saturday morning. The topic is the hot topic of stem cells. We just had the opportunity to spend an interesting hour with Dr. David Steenblock. He has been involved with the use of stem cells since 1990. So it was a good resource for us. Today we're going to make it much more local at this point. We're going to be talking to a local representative of someone who's nice enough to be able to supply me with the ability of treating people with stem cells. Now, I happened to meet this gentleman a few months ago, and ever since we have made a great friendship blossom from it because we both have in our minds how best to help those who live in Western Pennsylvania with this interesting thing called stem cells. We're going to be talking about it now. Let me take the opportunity to introduce him to you. Mr. Dan Pepock is with us. Good morning, Dan, and welcome aboard.
Good morning, Dr. Courtney. Thanks for having me.
Well, Dan, I've now known you for, as I mentioned, a few months, but when I first met you, a good place to start for me is probably a very appropriate place to start for us all today, which was to ask you then, hey, how is it that you got involved with stem cells? And to do so, your profession has taken you into many hospitals throughout Western Pennsylvania, or for that matter, the country. Why don't you walk us back a little bit, tell us about that previous career, and how that ultimately evolved to become really involved with stem cells?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. I basically started in the mid to late 80s in orthopedics, and I was trained to help doctors implant total hip replacements and total knee replacements and do trauma surgeries for people that have had terrible fractures and accidents where they needed some type of implanted device. And throughout the career, being in many hospitals in the medical business, it was very rewarding to see when you could help people and make a difference. And my career transcended into the spine specialty with a company based out of Oregon. And I had a few problems with my own personal health. I'm a diabetic, and I had chronic foot wounds that opened pressure foot wounds because I'm a former professional athlete. I tried out for the Dallas Cowboys and the Miami Dolphins, and I played Division I college football at Colorado State University. So 6'5", 310 pounds.
You're a big drink of water. I know that much. Go ahead.
You got that. And to make a long story short, I was going to the local wound clinics, and for 3 years I felt like I was on a treadmill because they would debride me every 2 weeks, and they were trying different products, everything from natural tissue, cadaver tissue, to synthetic products that were artificially manufactured. And for 3 years, I had no success in closing 2 of the foot wounds on my left foot. And it was very frustrating because working in the medical profession, being in and out of doctors' offices and hospitals, you run into a lot of people that are sick, a lot of infectious problems, and a lot of bacterial problems. And I was always worried about contacting cellulitis or another type of bacteria. I happened to be at a seminar, training seminar for the spine implants in New Orleans when I met a gentleman, and I told him what my plight was for the past 3 years. And he literally made a comment to me, and he said, "Nan, if I could heal your diabetic foot wounds, would you consider representing my product in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area? I know you have a good reputation. I know you'd work hard, and we would like to expand there. There's nobody there using our product." A couple months went by, and the week before Thanksgiving 2 years ago, I heard from Tom, and he asked me how my foot was doing, and the 2 wounds were still open, and they were 5 centimeters in diameter, and large. They were not improving. They weren't getting worse, but they weren't getting better. So in 48 hours, he sent me a product, stem cell product called amniotic human allograft tissue, and he coached me through the injection, and it was amazing. I followed up the injection with a light compression wrap, and the first dressing change was in 3 days, and I noticed a significant cellular difference and a light coating of skin over the wounds, which left me very optimistic.
Because you haven't had skin over that wound in 3 years, if I got this right.
3+ years, absolutely. So then when I changed the bandage, in a week and a half, I had complete, healthy, pink virgin skin for the first time in over 3 years. I mean, it was a life-changing situation.
Oh, sure.
And I stayed in contact with Tom and basically told him that I just can't believe what this has done to add to the quality of my life, because I no longer had to change bandages on my foot twice a day, which I did for 3+ years to protect against infection and bacteria infiltrating the wounds. And you never realize how nice it is to be able to take a shower and get dressed without having to bandage wounds.
Wow.
When it became a chronic part of my life. And at that point, I told them that I wanted to join their company.
Well, they certainly won you over. I guess maybe the way to put it is, I'm never really amazed when I begin to hear health professionals, whether they're directly involved or circuitously involved with patient care, one's own personal saga that can be turned around to such a positive stories as yours had, leaves you wanting to become involved with further spreading the word about whatever it happens to be that got you turned around. In this case, it was stem cells that did it. 3 years of working with a wound as a diabetic. It's well known that your wound issues are difficult anyway. And boy, you did confront one heck of a problem there. But I guess, and I am guessing, that since the stem cells were brought on board, you don't have any more wounds in the feet to worry about, correct?
You know, Dr. Courtney, that is really the special part of it. It was so exciting to see the wounds close, but as the skin matured over time, we're talking 2+ years now, I have not had another wound. You're correct. And the spots that were a problem, that were open for 3+ years, they've continued to stay closed and grow healthier, mature skin over the last 2 years. And that's really the change of the impact of the quality of my life has been extremely significant. It's a complete 180-degree turnaround.
Well, it's certainly always interesting when I hear you retell the story. And I think it was a good starting point for our listeners today. You know, they're all sitting out there and they all have their own issues. It may not necessarily be a wound that won't close, but there's some medical battle going on, and they're not doing too well with it. And I'm hoping that our discussions this morning start to raise the hope and lets the sunshine come through some pretty dingy-looking windows out there for a lot of people. So in picking up that gauntlet where you dropped it and moving this thing down the road a little further, let's start to talk about stem cells in a way that allows some communication skills to be taught to both between ourselves and our listeners. And I guess the first thing I'm going to start out by talking about is when it comes to stem cells, we've got 2 basic types of stem cells, those that are called homologous and those that are called autologous. Now, on the homologous side, very commonly used approaches to stem cells that have been out there for a while, something called PRP, another one called fat stem cells, adipose stem cells, and third, bone marrow. Would you and could you comment a little bit about those 3, and as far as stem cells go, how they rank with being able to help people with problems?
Well, you're correct. The PRP became the gold standard of stem cell treatments, whether it was for a wound, a sports injury, a surgical issue, or an autoimmune disease that they're treating nationally with the PRPs. Unfortunately, through the process that we learned, whether they get the harvest bone stem cells from the adipose, which is basically your fat that they take, and they take a significant amount of fat and they put it in a centrifuge and they spin it down to get out the impurities. And they have to retreat the area with a significant volume of that plasma that is left over, that was created clean from the centrifuge. And the aspirate, the bone marrow, basically it's a painful procedure where they stick a huge needle in your femur and they extract a certain amount of cc's from the bone marrow. They also centrifuge that, spin it down, and get it to the impurities. The thing that we found out through the research and through the evolution of regenerative medicine is the age of the patient, the cell viability, and the basic overall strength of your cells to heal or to fix or mend an ailment, whether it is a bone, a soft tissue, a surgical procedure, or an autoimmune system disorder. The older you get, the less viability you have. So, unfortunately, most of the patients that were being treated with PRPs were 50 years of age or older, which you're greatly affected your cell viability by the age, which as a baby, you start out 97 to 100% cell viability. At age 50, they're seeing rates as low as 15 to 25 to 30%.
Oh, my goodness. I didn't realize it dropped off even that much.
It really did. And the other thing that affects it is for people that have had a COPD, or like myself, diabetes, or ALS, or any type of eye disease, anything that they use to treat this, what happens is your whole life your cells have been exposed to those diseases already. So that is taxing on the strength of the cell in addition to just a normal, healthy, aging person.
All right. So homologous, to clarify this point for our listeners, are a group of stem cells that are literally harvested from the individual himself and are used then on themselves. And as a result, there's some good things about that.
Yes,
Certainly, you don't have to worry about any rejection issues. They're completely safe. But they are age-related in terms of their ability to help. And, when we're listening on a Sunday to a Steeler football game and we hear the announcer say, oh, so-and-so will be headed down to the Southside facility tomorrow to get those injections. The injections that they're talking about are the PRP injections,
yes,
which are platelet-rich plasma, where they take the patient's blood, spin it down, and then take off an amount of supernatant fluid that has all the health factors in it. Well, if you're a Pittsburgh Steeler and you're 25 years old, there's a lot of health factors in there. But if you're 50 or 60 or 70 years old, the level of those factors, and no matter what the body fluid, whether it is the fat or the bone marrow that they're being harvested from, you're only as good as your age allows. Would that be a true statement?
Absolutely correct.
All right. Now, quickly, as a group, we want to talk about the autologous stem cells. These are really very exciting because these are all coming from sources with vibrant and youthful and very aggressive cells, and as such, they are where the real money makers are today in terms of the interest and the enthusiasm. And the autologous cells, which come from humans, they just don't come from your own human anatomy, are embryonic, amniotic, and cord cells. The embryonic are in my opinion, laden with problems right from the get-go because they're harvested from fetal parts, and that is just something I think no one should ever get into, and morally and philosophically as well as scientifically, I'm not even going to go there. But we wanted to at least mention it, okay? But then we're left with these others two, amniotic and cord cells. And could you spend a moment talking about these two sources of cells? Because I believe all the advantages with none of the disadvantages are found in that category. Amniotic first and cord second. Go ahead, take a whack at it.
Basically, the amniotic cells, they're both harvested similarly, but I'll touch on the finer points, the huge difference at the end. But basically, they are harvested from screened donors. They are mothers who have scheduled cesarean section births, and it has to be a healthy childbirth. And prior to the birth, they are screened for prenatal nutrition, communicable diseases, and their medical history is reviewed by a medical director to make sure that they are a safe donor. The great thing about these cells is when they're harvested aseptically after the birth of the child and the child is healthy, they are aseptically collected, placed on ice, and they are sent to the processing facility to begin the processing for treatment. The other thing about these cells is they're called immune privileged because they are so young. There have been 0 DNA markers in these cells, so they will adapt to the DNA of the patient that is being treated with these cells. And the nice thing about that also is the cell viability is still between 97 and 100%, and that's the strongest of a cell the potential in the life of a cell is at that stage of the game.
We'd expect that a newly born, if there's anything that conjures up images of something new, something vital, something vibrant, it certainly is any discussion about anything to do with a newborn child. So that the amnion, of course, which is in part of the placenta, and the spinal cord, which is also, these are places where we can get specimens from and extract cells from that have that, you said 97% viability factor, correct?
Yes, sir.
Which means that the likelihood that you can have your cellular tissue be restored is going to be in direct proportion to how viable the cells are that you receive. And these two appear to be head over heels in terms of how many advantages they bring to the field of stem cell therapy. Now, let me ask you this. What is the storage? So they're extracted, how they stored, how they packed, and then how are they sent to a doctor like me?
What happens is they are harvested from the placenta and the umbilical cord that is usually thrown in the garbage traditionally. And they are collected, put on ice, and we have a team of scientists and trained, certified manufacturing people that fly to that facility where the birth and the donation has occurred. They pick up the cells, take them back to the processing plant. They do some things like they strip out the chorion, which the chorion is the blanket that separates the maternal cells and organ from the baby and the baby cells and organs. And because that protective blanket serves no other regenerative or cellular benefits, it is stripped out off of the placenta and the umbilical cord. Then it goes through a process where some companies will use what they call DMSO or serum cryopreservation mediums, and that can also affect the cells because all cell counts aren't created equal. There's a pre-thaw or pre-freeze and a post-thaw cell count that becomes very vital to the credibility and the success of the cellular treatment.
And is there quite a difference between both of those?
Well, what happens is with the amnion-only based cells, they estimate, and it's an estimate, and it's a very strong estimate, between 700,000 to 1.2 million of these regenerative cells per 1 ml. Now, when you incorporate the cord blood, because the cord blood is the absolute richest supply of these vibrant, excitable, strong cells, what happens is for that same ml, you're looking at 32 to 64 million. And they're remarkable cells. The one company that we use for your practice, it's a markable situation, so it's very credible. We're not estimating anything. We know exactly what we're treating, and they have set a standard of a minimum of 32 million cells per ml. So basically, it's 32 times as strong and as powerful to fix the problem with your patient that you're treating.
By using cord blood, using cord cells. Now, I think this is a concept. I always like to educate my listeners to make them a better consumer. And if there's one aspect that is certainly registering loud and clear with me, is the ability to ask the question and then to interpret the answer of how many cells are contained in an ml of that particular type of stem cell. And you've already said quite a difference between amniotic stem cells, which are wonderful. I mean,
yes,
the vibrancy of those cells are every bit as vibrant as any other form. But in that particular formatting of cells, there's 1.5 million tops of cells found in 1 ml, and we administer them in aliquots of 1 ml. Now, what you just said about the cord cells is a mind blower, and it certainly is a game winner with me selecting what cells I'm going to use. Did you say between 32 and 64 million cells? 32 times as many?
Yes, sir. This is without a doubt the latest technology on the regenerative market. They don't use DMSO preservative. They don't use serums as a preservative to store, to preserve the cells, because this company, the way and it's a licensed, it's kind of a secretive proprietary processing. That's why they invested in the technology where they could actually take the picture of each lot that is manufactured, that is also delivered with those cells to your office for treatment to your patients. And that's what adds so much credibility, viability, and it just makes common sense. If you had a chance to get 1 to 1.5 million cells, or 32 million to 64 million, meaning 32 million is the minimum they'll ship to your office for your patients.
Per ml.
Per ml. That is off the charts, significant in the outcome and the quality of the treatment.
Well, one final point to make about this. I go on 2 points. And I may get interrupted by a news break, but I'm going to make them anyway. The first one is all of the homologous fluids that can be harvested and which they can centrifuge out factors are coming from an adult and given to an adult. And even if young, don't even come anywhere near the 97% purity factor. Do I got that right so far?
Spot on. It's not even, it wouldn't even be on the same measuring device.
So in terms of homologous versus autologous and the particular sources from the autologous, I'm looking at cord cells as having every bit of an advantage over every other form of stem cells that are available in the marketplace today. Do you see it that way?
Yes, sir. It is currently the most trackable, provable stem cell treatment on the market today, without a doubt. I've been in the regenerative treatment market now for 3+ years, and I've watched this evolution in just 3 years grow to great extents because of the way it is helping patients. We are treating patients that formerly had PRPs that you mentioned, that got no relief or they weren't happy with the results.
Yeah, no.
We do a treatment with these cells, and they're contacting us within hours sometimes and days of the difference that they're seeing in the treatment product.
All right, here's what I want to do. I want to take a short break. I think that our listeners at least can now be intelligent in a conversation by asking any doctor to verify how many cells are in that thing. And the standard is now 32 to 64 million, and they must be the actual vital cells themselves, not all the other stuff that could get mixed up with them. And we're going to leave that particular concept behind for this moment. We're going to take a short break for news. We're going to come back, and we're going to focus in on a unique phrase that I've learned from you, Dan, which is one and done. We're going to find out what one and done means when we return. We're with Mr. Dan Pepock talking about stem cells. It's hot. It is the way to deal with your issues, and we'll be right back in a moment to talk about it some more. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back once again to the Weekend Wellness Workshop. Our topic today, I hope, is intriguing you. Certainly has spiced up our practice around here. Stem cells are hot, folks. It's spreading across this country, and Western Pennsylvania is not being ignored. It is a target place for these kinds of therapies to be now available. We hope to be able to educate you on where to find them, how to ask for them and how to know that you are getting the best possible source of the correction that you are seeking. Our guest today has been Mr. Dan Pepock, and he is in the sales of and supplies me with the stem cells that I use. We've been talking about the sources of stem cells, how they're harvested, how they're packaged. Are you with us, Dan?
Yes, sir.
Dan, I wanted to share with my listeners, and because you captivated me with this phrase when we first met, and it's a phrase that I continue to use as my calling card when talking about stem cells. You had told me that with respect to people who receive them, that they should be considering the use of stem cells as one and done. Would you take that concept and let our listeners hear how you expand it? Because it's turned out to be absolutely accurate. How did you come up with it? And let our listeners know how they can expect to live by it.
Well, basically, the neat thing about the amnion cells, they've been around since the 1900s. About 10 years ago, they were FDA approved. So clinicians like yourself and doctors like yourself became more comfortable applying it to their practices and treating their patients who were open to a new treatment. And one of the things that we've experienced is an 80 to 85% first treatment success rate. And what I mean by that is traditionally with PRPs, depending on the severity of your injury, even some of the lightest injuries require multiple treatments. It's very seldom a one and done, where because of the power of these cells, the cell viability and the processing and the way it's delivered to you as a cryopreserved product, once it's injected for pain management, for sports injuries, for tendinitises, for arthritises, for all types of joint pains, we are experiencing an 80 to 85% success rate with the first one and only treatment.
One and done, as you
say.
say.
One and done.
Now,
because
go ahead.
We have found that we are treating patients now that are willing to try anything to be pain-free or that have some type of condition or disease, that a true regenerative medicine product can help them with their ailment. And I can tell you that we've done hips, knees, shoulders, ankles, wrists, things that people had experienced PRPs in their mind with no success, and they just don't want to have a surgery, because usually after surgery there can be certain limitations placed on your normal activity level. So what we were watching was the success rate of the people that were treated, and after one injection they were having success, and we were getting other referrals from their friends, from their family, from people they were running into, because people of a certain age, especially as we grow older in our lives, what happens is our bodies break down. It starts on a cellular level. And when they're treated with these young zero DNA immune privileged cells, it's kind of like giving a super electronical spark jump start. And what happens is, because the cells are so powerful and so young, they replicate themselves every 3 to 6 weeks. And
what's that mean?
Basically, what a cell does is, the younger and more powerful it is, it splits more frequently. Basically, a person that's 50 years or older, their cells may split once every 2-3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Where with these cells coming out of the donors, and once we thaw them and treat the patient, basically these cells have been proven to replicate in 3 to 6 weeks. If you get injected, we'll keep the math simple with 1 million of these cells. In 3 weeks, that 1 million turns into 2 million. In 3 more weeks, that 2 million turns into 4 million. In 3 more weeks, that 4 million turns into 8 million. And what happens on the third cycle, you usually have apoptosis, which is when a cell dies, but the only ones that expire is only the 1 million. So now you're left with 7 million healthy regenerative cells. And that process continues throughout your regenerative healing process. And these cells scientifically know how to differentiate into what your body needs, whether it's a knee or a hip, or, we use it for another type of disease. We make sure that we do a calculated decision on how to treat the patient.
Yeah, now, you just introduced 2 new concepts that we want to make sure we make before we get on out of here. Number one is this thing with doubling time. And I noticed you started with the very conservative estimate of 1 million. And I just want to reintroduce where, I've gone completely hog wild, which is if I can start with 32 million, then 3 weeks later, I've got 64.
Yes, sir.
And then 3 weeks later, I don't even know. Is that 128?
128
okay.
million.
So, I mean.
And then it goes to 256 million.
All right. You've done the math. And all I can tell you, so as a medical professional that I am, it's the number of cells, vibrant cells, that you're going to have the opportunity to reverse and turn these conditions around, whether they're for regenerative purposes for a extremity or joint that doesn't work right, whether it's a sports injury, or whether it's a host of other medical problems that have nothing related to either sports injuries or joint.
Yes.
And so that to me is what makes my mind up about. I'm going for 32. What are you going for, Dan?
I'm going for 32 on up.
Okay, absolutely. And then the fact that wherever we place these cells, they intuitively have the ability to understand the tissue with which they find themselves, and they begin to encourage the growth of healthy, normal, vibrant cells in whatever region that was. And that's why these are called multipotent cells, because they can do whatever is required of them to change into whatever cells are needed in whatever, and I'll use a raw term, I say zip code, wherever we put them, whatever zip code that was in, that's the substance, that's the material, that's the ligament, that's the organ that they become, and that's how regenerative medicine works. Did I make any mistake there?
No, sir, and I think it's important because you do have an educated patient base. Is these human amnion cells contain epithelial cells, mesenchymal cells, collagens, fibronectins, laminins, fibroblasts, growth factors, carbohydrates, proteins, peptides, lipids, pyruvate, electrolytes, enzymes, hormones, and a big one, cytokines. Another big one, your 100% natural hyaluronic acid. And these are all things that our bodies produce to make us human beings. And unfortunately, through the occurrence of time, they lose the ability to replicate at a higher level and at a higher power.
So we are coming to the tail end, but I believe, because I know what's coming next, we have been very excited, Dan and I, with how we've been able to help people who have come to me to be treated with stem cells. And, there certainly were those group of people, and we expected them, who were coming to us with the various joint problems that were out there, and we have done very well with them. But I want to tell you, too, other patients with other issues have surfaced, and in particular, and I know you know the individual I'm talking about, we have a gentleman with COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, whose life, if I could understand it, was literally had come to an end in terms of any vibrancy, any desire to live. It was quickly evaporating for this man, and he has consented, Dan, to come on the show and talk about his experience. So, Dan, I want to thank you because we're right at the tail end of our segment. I want to thank you for coming aboard today. We will bring you back in the near future to talk about this some more. We're going to take a short break, ladies and gentlemen, and when we come back, we're going to have one of, I won't call it a testimonial, but a patient who wasn't doing too well that is doing awfully well now, and the only thing that changed were stem cells. Okay, Dan?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you so much, Dan. We're going to take a short break, folks. We'll be back in a moment with our very famous guest. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back once again to the Weekend Wellness Workshop. Having a discussion this weekend about a very hot topic. The topic is stem cell therapy and the fact that we want to educate you, our listener, to be able to be conversant with stem cells, to have a level of sophistication about your conversability about stem cells, and giving you the dialogue to interrogate anybody who comes to you and professes that they have the right type of stem cells for you. Now, as we were ending our last segment with Mr. Pepock, we told you that we had a particular individual in the wings that we'd like to bring aboard today. It's the first opportunity. I've literally had a chance to talk to him maybe now for 3 or 4 weeks. The last time I spoke with him, I was fairly amazed at his story. His name is Al, and we're going to talk to Al and find out how life was before stem cells and how life is after stem cells. And let's see, let's see if there's any difference to note. Now, Al, are you there out there, my friend?
I am, yes.
Thank you for coming aboard today, and thanks for consenting to spending some time with us on our show. A while ago, Al, things weren't going too well for you. You were out there struggling with COPD, that's chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It is a completely uncurable and unreversible disease in any of its components. This is a medical fact that all doctors know, and unfortunately, all patients know too. Al, tell us how life was prior to the stem cells and how you were getting along.
Well, life was really rough. I had a hard time almost crossing my home. Taking out the garbage was becoming more of an impossibility. Working in the garden, I could take maybe 1 or 2 shovelfuls, and I'd have to stop and take a long break. And recovery from the exhaustion was long, perhaps up to 5 minutes before I can really get my breath totally back. I was on, and I still am taking Advair and Spiriva, both. And I had an emergency inhaler, which was albuterol. Currently, things have changed dramatically in the fact that now I know simple tasks that people that do not have COPD take for granted, like taking out the garbage, and small things like that have become easier. I'm not a marathon runner at this point in time, obviously, but still on the same token, I may become out of breath, but recovery has shortened dramatically, maybe close to 1 minute maximum. I'm able to breathe. Another thing that people that don't have COPD may not realize is when you have this in lung ailments, you cannot fill your lungs with oxygen. It's a small thing perhaps, but now I can fill my lungs with oxygen almost at will. It's almost like you could only fill your lungs up maybe 80% full of oxygen, and you cannot get that final extra breath. It seems very small. However, when you can't do it, it's huge.
It's huge. Yes. So all in all, you can take the garbage out now.
Yeah.
In terms of the medicines that you take, how do you use your inhalers as frequency as you did before? That's my first question.
No, I carry it with me. The emergency inhaler I carry with me, obviously, it wouldn't be something that I fall back on if I have, because there's something in your brain that you know that if you can't breathe, you just grab it.
Understood.
I mean, without breath, it's impossible to live. So I do carry it along, but I do not use it as frequently as I do. If I am, for example, last night I work a full job. I have to lift pallets, and I lift them up and I put them on top. Before, it was impossible for me to do that. I could not. The recovery would be impossible, and I'd have to have other people do it.
Oh, goodness.
Last night, I picked up 2 pallets and threw it on top of the pile, and I did not use the rescue inhaler, which at one time I would have had it done, even if I could pick the pallets up at all.
You were just barely getting by, weren't you? I mean,
exactly, on a day-to-day basis.
Day-to-day basis, and people were chiming in to help you because they realized you were afflicted. But you, I get this feeling, needed to work, continue to need to work, and so no matter what, you were out there giving it your best effort, but you were paying one heck of a price for that effort. It was work with misery. Would that be fair?
Oh, yeah, that'd be very fair. It would be, you know, I first of all, I work because I want to work, but it's a situation where I do some physical work, and yeah, people would see that I was suffering, and they would, you know, come in and help me. Where now, I guess they're just watching out the corner of their eye, but I am doing the work now because I can't breathe.
Oh, this is great. Now, this is something that I mean, we did this injection for you in December, right?
December 19th. Yeah.
December 19th. And here we are. We're just being in the first couple of days of February. So have you noticed that this thing, does it continue to get better? Has it leveled off? Would when you first got this injection, how much time transpired before something happened? Fill us in on some time frame issues here.
It seemed like it was, as the first week progressed, it seemed like it was getting better and better. The progression has been constant but slow since that time. And I can't say that it has plateaued yet. I am still every day aware of something new that I can do. Again, it's not something that I ever forget. I mean, it's on my mind constantly, that I am breathing better. I mean, my wife's outside observation is that I am, in fact, doing better. She says to me all the time, it's obvious. I mean, I could go and give you examples of putting up the lights on the outside of the house and taking them back down. I don't know if we have time for that, but it took me a long time to put the lights up. After the infusion, the lights came down and practically one day, and put away in practically one day, when it took me 2 or 3 days to put it up. So,
oh no, I got that image. I captured that image. I hear you. You put the lights up before you were injected.
Right.
you took them down after the stem cells had been injected. So
right.
yeah,
it took me less than half the time.
That's great. Well, I'll tell you. Look, I'm so pleased for you, and you have taught me as much as I've been able to help you, believe you me. And as our listeners are listening to us right now, I'm hoping that they can envision themselves being assisted. They may not have chronic lung disease. They may have some other malady, but they're suffering too. And they feel themselves gradually eroding, and life isn't as much fun as it should be. And so, Al, I think you give them great hope about some sunshine coming through their own windows, just like, well, thank goodness it's come through yours. I want to thank you so much, and hopefully maybe even bring you back. I have a feeling that, as Mr. Pepock says, this is still yet to come. There's more still yet to come, and I'd sure like for you to share it with us when it does come. Do you mind coming back sometime in the future?
Absolutely not at all. I'd be thrilled.
All right. Al, thank you once again. Enjoy your day. Pass my best regards on to your wife. I'll be talking to you soon, my friend.
Thank you very much for increasing my ability to breathe.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you for coming. Okay. There you go. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. A patient, I think it's pretty happy. By the way, the disease he has, there's just nothing that can turn that disease around. chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is not ever really associated with nice rosy things to discuss about it. And it was so nice to hear that they're possible. If you suffer from COPD, you may want to consider stem cells, and you may want to consider the number of stem cells now that you've been brought up to the level of how to have this discussion. If you, in fact, feel as though you'd like to be able to discuss this more, I strongly urge you to come on in to see us so we can talk about it. We are doing a pretty steady diet of stem cell injections here, and we certainly do our complement of those with the sports-injured individuals. There are a whole myriad of patients who come to us because of degenerative diseases over a lifetime, and now here they are in their 60s and 70s. Many of them have been told by their orthopedic doctors that they should consider joint replacement therapy, and I say, no, just wait. Not that I'm going to guarantee you that you're not going to need that joint replaced, but I think that if you are smart, that you should always put these very oftentimes heroic, but certainly very invasive surgeries at a physician of last resort and never first resort. And if I've seen anything since I've been doing stem cells, it deserves to be occupying first place. That, as you heard Dan talk about, 85% of those people who get stem cell injection, 85% are one and done, and that their particular benefits just keep getting better, probably starting a week to two after the injection, but from that point moving forward. And I've tracked patients now 2 and 3 months after injection, and they're doing better with each and every month. None of them has slowed down just yet. And I hope that that's nothing more than additional encouragement for you all. Stem cells are here to stay. Stem cells are going to be the rage as time moves on. And I think, however, the time had come to take the lid off of using stem cells here in my office. They are rare to find in terms of clinicians who are able to get their hands on these more sophisticated products. Now that we've made you the better consumer, the question to ask will be, by the way, how many stem cells are in that 1 milliliter vial? And we now know that the numbers can vary anywhere from under 1 million all the way up to 32. I hope to be able to tell you sometime in the near future that there's a product that has 78 million cells, and I'll be first to use it and first to report it and tell you all about it. Anyway, it was an enjoyable day today to bring you the message of stem cell therapy. Best of luck to you in the future. If you want to pay attention next week and listen to the next topic up. And by the way, if you want to schedule an appointment in our facility, the number here is 724-942-3002. We're the Courtney Medical Group. We're located in McMurray, Pennsylvania at 724-942-3002. See you next week. Bye now.